Hello, welcome back, guys. We are continuing our review of Oath of the Gatewatch, this time looking at the white cards. Again, I want to say thanks for watching for anybody who's left any comments on the other videos so far. If you haven't seen them, check out the videos for the lands and the colorless artifact cards. This is the first actually colored section we're going to do. We're going to go through all the colored. I'm going to leave the multicolored cards for last because, in my opinion, the multicolored cards are some of the most exciting ones. But let's start looking at the white ones with the commons. Our first one here is going to be Dazzling Reflection. This is a 2-mana instant that says you gain life equal to target creature's power. Notice that you can target your own creature with that, or you can target an opponent's creature. The next time that creature would deal damage this turn, prevent that damage. This card is not amazing by any sense, but it's actually quite good, and it can lead to some blowouts. It's not quite protection from a color, but the fact that it prevents damage means you can use this as a combat trick to kind of trade off your opponent's creature without losing yours, also gaining some life in the mix. Now you can use this to gain life. For instance, if you have the creature with the highest power on board, that may look like the most appealing target because it'll gain you the most life, but you really want to use the second part where you're preventing the damage. So against a very aggressive deck, this is kind of like gaining life twice in that you are actually gaining life once and you're not taking damage a second time. So I don't want too many of these, and I'm happy playing them against aggressive decks. I might even consider main board in one of them if I don't have a lot of combat tricks, but the card is just fine, if not the most exciting thing. Also remember there is a Life Gains Matters deck from Battle for Zendikar, even though it's not apparent how prevalent that theme is going to be, with Oath of the Gatewatch being the more abundant cards that we're going to be using for this draft. Moving on, we have Alpha Protector. This is a 3-mana 1/4 Vigilance, and that's about it. Not exciting at all. It is an ally, so it goes with that. I think the reason this card would be something you pick is if you have a lot of Cohort cards, or for some reason you're running a lot of equipment, because this kind of card does carry equipment very well. Yeah, the Cohort seems like it works well with Vigilance creatures just because you can attack with that creature and still have it available to tap for Cohort on your opponent's turn. But this card is something I'm going to be passing quite often. I imagine it's going to go late in the packs. And even if I do want allies, I feel like there are some better allies to choose from this time around, in addition to some better ones from Battle for Zendikar. This card is just not screaming anything in particular at me, even though it's a fine playable card. Very unexciting, though. Here we have Expedition Raptor, and I'm going to warn you now, there will be jokes made during your drafts where people say, I pulled an Expedition, ... Raptor. I'm going to be making that joke every single time I see this card. So if you play with me at my store, get ready for it. Anyway, we have the standard 5-mana flyer that we've seen 1,000 times in recent sets that has something to do with counters. So Supply Line Cranes and Aven Tactician were both fine playable cards in their own format. So I'm willing to bet Expedition Raptor is okay. Here we should talk about the support mechanic. So when Expedition Raptor enters the battlefield, you support 2. That means you choose 2 other creatures. You cannot choose the Raptor itself. You choose 2 other creatures on the battlefield, and you put a 1/1 counter on up to each of them. So the fact that this can't put a counter on itself makes it kind of a little bit weaker than the rest of these, I believe. Because if you just play this on an empty board, it's a 2/2 flyer for 5, which is awful. But if you're getting both counters on 2 other creatures, I think this is fine because that's adding 4 power to the board with a flyer to boot. If you just have one other creature, it's still fine. It's like a 3/3 flyer for 5, which is okay. But I think I want the full support 2 to be active before I want to play this card. It shouldn't be that hard. The 5 mana means that you're probably going to have 2 creatures on the battlefield before you can play this. It's also worth noting support is very good for 2-headed giant because you can put counters on your partner's creatures if you need to. You do not have to put them on just your own creature. But yeah, support can't target the creature itself that has support, so that is worth noting with these support cards. So I will be evaluating support as kind of a weak mechanic unless you can get the full extent out of it. That's going to change depending on the card, but that's just where I am with it. I think Expedition Raptor is fine if you know for a fact that you're probably going to get support 2 out of it. If you know for a fact you're going to get 0 out of it, then I would pass on this. Alright, Isolation Zone. This is a 4-mana double white enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you exile target creature or enchantment an opponent controls as long as you control Isolation Zone. So this is kind of like Stasis Snare without the flash. It's obviously worse than Stasis Snare. Stasis Snare is just a absurd uncommon and a first pickable card. Isolation Zone is kind of a weaker, dumbed down version of that because you can't flash it in. You have to do it on your turn. But it can hit enchantments, which is not irrelevant. We didn't see any super busted enchantments the first time around, but there are a couple enchantments in this set that might be worth sorry about that. That might be worth hitting with this. Most of the time you're just going to use it as creature removal, and 4 mana exile target creature is pretty good. Obviously this has the same downfall that all Oblivion Ring type effects have, in that if they destroy the enchantment, then they get their creature back or their enchantment back. And Feldar Cub is still a card that people will see. A very good sideboard card for this kind of effect. But yeah, Isolation Zone, I imagine, I'm surprised it's not uncommon, but this is quite a good card, and I see it being very highly drafted. Core Scythe Master. This is a 3-mana 3/1, so we really want our 3/1s to be 2 mana. That's just kind of where they're usually at, but let's see if it's worth it. First thing worth noting, it is an ally, and it has first strike as long as it's attacking. Well, obviously it's a 3/1, so you want to be attacking with it. First strike, I think this is well known by most people, but for newer players, first strike and double strike are some of the easiest ways to win a game, just because it lets your creature go kind of unattested. Obviously that's different depending on the board state, but if you get your first strikers down early, you can push in a lot of damage because they're usually on par with what your opponent has, and your opponent's going to have to throw multiple creatures in front or something like that. If this thing gets double blocked, it's almost certainly dying, but it's going to take something out along the way. If you're looking to get very aggressive, or you're looking to play an ally deck that's super strong and pushes in a lot of early damage, this might be where you want. This also points out kind of the problem I have with Cohort, is I understand Cohort was made to kind of give allies a defensive strategy, but I think the aggressive strategy for allies is just better almost all the way around. So you want to be attacking with your allies, not leaving them back to tap them down. And this kind of goes against the Cohort mechanic, in that you never want this card to not be attacking. So that's just where I'm at with Cohort. Let me know what you think about it. I think it's a pretty weak mechanic, but that's just me. Here we have another ally. This one is Core Sky Climber. I guess the idea is he's swinging on white or something like that. But alright. We have a 3-mana 3/2, which is pretty much on par with the last creature we saw, minus the first strike. This one can pay 2 mana to give itself flying for the turn. This seems pretty good. Not busted, not uncommon level. This is just a good, solid common card for your white attacking decks. The fact that it can get over other creatures is pretty good. One problem I had with the ally deck in Battle for Zendikar is, in my opinion, it was one of the worst decks, but it could get early aggression, but once your opponent started playing things that could block, the allies couldn't get through anymore, and they were just stuck sitting there, and you'd have to push in a bunch of allies at once and lose a bunch in combat. But cards like the last one we saw that can give itself first strike, and this one can give itself flying, that might give allies a different way to just kind of go over the top and ignore what your opponent's doing while still pushing in a lot of damage. Again, this doesn't play very well with Cohort because you want to be attacking with it, and it also gives you, in worst case scenarios, a blocker against flyers, and it's going to trade with a lot of the flyers in this format, which is pretty decent. Makindi Aeronaut, we're just going to keep this short. Don't play 1/3 flyers for 2 unless you absolutely have to. It is an ally this time around. I guess the Flyers decided that they wanted to join the battle, but we've seen this card. I think I want to say Territorial Rock from what was it, Dragons of Tarkir was a card that people played all the time, and it's annoying when you see it on the other side of the field, but it doesn't really do that much. This goes with Cohort a little bit better because it's a blocker. Really the reason you play a card like this is because you want to block your opponent's 2/2s or 3/1s, stuff like that, but I don't think this card does enough. And I imagine this is going to be one of those last pick type cards. It is an ally though, so it's not completely dead in the water. It's just not very good. Alright, Muddy Leap's back. When is Muddy Leap not back? We've seen Muddy Leap a lot in the last couple sets. The last time I think we saw it was Modern Masters 2015, and it was actually a pretty good card there. mainly because there was a double strike in sub-theme to red and white, and this could just let you push in a huge amount of damage. Mighty Leap's just fine. It lets you take down a flyer. You're usually going to win combat, since the +2/+2 is a pretty big boost over most flyers. Mighty Leap was also in Origins, I believe, and that let you push in renowned creatures. There's not a lot that you really need pushing in, because there's not a lot of creatures that really do stuff on hitting the opponent or dealing combat damage, but Mighty Leap's always a nice option to have. Usually see it very late in the pack, almost last pick, so don't fight for them. Just play it if you need it. Don't bog your deck down with one or too many of these. Just play one if you need to, but decent combat trick. Alright, another exemplary bad Cohort card, or I'm calling it bad. Maybe Cohort turns out to be better than I'm giving it credit for, but here we have a 2-mana 2/2 Cohort. Tap this plus another ally you control, gain 2 life. 2 life's just not really worth it. If they want Cohort, if I'm tapping down 2 of my own creatures, I really want to gain more than 2 life. I feel like the cost for Cohort is not justified by what you're getting out of it, at least not in any of the cards we've seen so far, and I think we're about to see another one right after this. I guess this is playable just because it's a 2-mana 2/2, and this kind of effect is fine in a board stall, but really, do you want your allies to be sitting back just gaining you 2 life? No, not really. Unless you have a bunch of the Vigilance ones, then you can play a very slow, grindy deck that kind of gains you attrition off of Cohort while still attacking with Vigilance, but I don't see Undo War Cleric making any sort of waves in Limited, except being a 2-mana 2/2, with upside, which is always playable anyway. Here we have Spawnbinder Mage. This is 4-mana 2/4, kind of a mediocre body, but a decent blocker, since most of the creatures we've seen so far in white don't quite push past 4. But this one has Cohort, which means tap this plus another ally you control, and then tap target creature. I do want to point out that even though Cohort is a tap ability on the creature, so if Spawnbinder Mage has Summoning Sickness, you can't use it. But if Spawnbinder Mage does not have Summoning Sickness and you just played another ally, you can use this using the other ally, since the tap ability is on this creature. But at any rate, this one is basically tap 2 of your creatures, tap 1 of your opponent's creatures. Again, you have to be super grindy. This is kind of like a end of your opponent's turn, tap a creature down. But this is not a very good tapper. Tap 2 creatures to tap 1 of your opponent's creatures. I'm not very excited about that. If my opponent's playing nothing but big fatties, and that's just kind of their game plan is to win with one big thing, then sure, but I just don't see these white cards being very good right now. Searing Light, also another card I'm kind of in the boat about, so I'd like to hear your opinion about this. Destroy target attacking or blocking creature with power 2 or less. So it has to be attacking or blocking, and it has to have power 2 or less. We've seen a lot of 3/1s and stuff like that, but we've only looked at a couple white cards so far, so my inclination is this card is playable, but I don't want too many of them because it is a dead card. It's not like it deals 2 damage, so I can't just like finish something up. It only targets something with power 2 or less. Maybe good with Dampening Pulse. It makes those 3 power creatures a little bit smaller so we can push through them, but in my opinion, I don't want very many of these. I'm happy to have them in the sideboard against aggressive decks because they will often have creatures that die to this, but Searing Light just doesn't exactly scream to me A+ card or 10 out of 10. It's more of like a mid-pack card that I'm happy to have one of. Alright, and I think this is the last common here, but Shoulder to Shoulder is 3 mana for support 2. Again, that means you choose 2 creatures and you put a counter on each of them, up to 2 creatures, and then you draw a card. So this does cantrip, which makes it a little more appealing than it normally would be. I was going to put the comparison here to Earthing Arms, which was a 2 mana green sorcery, to put 2 counters on 1 creature, but I guess the cards are different enough. This one draws a cards, and Earthing Arms had a Awaken on it, but this I'm not going to play it very often. I need to be in a very aggressive deck with lots of low drop creatures for me to want this sort of effect. The fact that it draws a card is always a nice thing. We want our cards to kind of make up for themselves, and if this was just 3 mana, put 2 counters on a creature, it wouldn't be very exciting at all. Again, kind of shines in Two-Headed Giant, even though it's still not busted there, in that you can draw a card while also putting counters on your partner's creatures. But there you go, Shoulder to Shoulder, a common support card, and this shows that support can be on sorceries and instants, not just creatures. Yep, alright, first uncommon here, Iona's Blessing. This is 4 mana, basically a reprint of Mark of Honor, but it also lets you, Mark by Honor, but it lets you block an additional creature. So it gives +2/+2 Vigilance, and the enchanted creature can block an additional creature. I would avoid this. I know people always talk about the Aura trap, and that is Auras give your opponent an opportunity to 2-for-1 use. Sometimes they're just great when your opponent can't get rid of the creature, and sometimes that +2/+2 is enough to push your creature out of like burn range or combat damage range, and it really just lets you push in. Also, they're decent on flyers and unblockable creatures. But it is true that if you're this doesn't draw you a card or anything, so if your opponent just has a kill spell for your creature, they're getting 2 cards out of you for the price of 1. Mark by Honor was okay, almost unplayable, borderline unplayable in M15 draft, but I don't really want to make the comparison because I guess M15 kind of had cards that cared about auras, whereas we don't really see that here in Oath of the Gatewatch. So this is the closest comparison we have, but again, we have to be careful about making direct comparisons and saying that the cards are just going to play out the same. My opinion is stay away from Iona's Blessings unless you really need to take down your opponent's blockers, but I'm not going to write it off as completely unplayable. Make a Stand. This is the type of card I like way more than most people do. This is 3 mana instant. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain indestructible until end of turn. First off, this is protection from Wrath, which we don't see very often, but it's always nice to have that sort of thing. Planar Outburst is still a card you need to worry about. This can do a lot of things. It can trade up in combat, and you know that your creatures are going to survive. It can give you a little bit of extra damage, kind of as a weak fortify type card if you're in a very aggressive strategy, kind of as a cheaper version of like Inspired Charge. If you're just pushing in tons of tokens, then that extra 1 damage per card can be relevant. But really the Indestructible is the thing here. You can use this on blocks as a combat trick to just kind of blow your opponent out. It isn't uncommon, so it won't be you won't have to put 3 or 4 of them in the deck, and it does cost 3 mana, so you have to leave that mana up. I think a savvy player is going to be aware that this card exists after a while, but I think this is a card that gets, it's actually usually better during sealed pre-releases when people don't know that it actually exists, and they have to read it and say, oh, well, none of your creatures are dying this turn. I like this sort of combat trick that I know my creatures are going to survive, but let me know what you think about it. Is it really that good? Is it just kind of meh? Is it like a 5 out of 10? I think it's more of like a 7 or 8 if I were to give it a rating, just because I like to know that my creatures are going to survive. But there you go, Make a Stand. Alright, Step Glider, card that I think is going to be quite decent. This is a 5 mana 2/4 flying and vigilance. I put Ghostly Sentinel down here because it is the same cost and the same mix of stats and abilities as Ghostly Sentinel. Ghostly Sentinel was a fine card, but the 3 toughness really meant that it died to a lot of things, and the 3 power meant that it got completely disregarded. So a lot of times you'd spend 5 mana on Sentinel and it would just die. If not, Flying and Vigilance is very good. It means you're going to hit and just make sure you have a blocker and push through your opponent's flyers. This guy, Step Glider, is a little weaker on power but higher on toughness, which I usually like on my flyers. For 2 mana, a target creature with a 1/1 counter on it gains Flying and Vigilance until end of turn. Great with support. I assume this is the idea behind the card, is that it works well with support. You put 1/1 counters on yours or in Two-Headed Giant, your partner's creatures, and then you can target those creatures and give them Flying and Vigilance for the turn. So you're still going to have blockers left over. I think this is much better than Ghostly Sentinel, and I think I'd be happy to draft this card in a deck that has abilities that support. Alright, Stoneforge Acolyte. This is an Equipment Matters card. It's a 1 mana 1/2 with Cohort. So again, tap this and tap another ally you control. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Reveal an equipment card from among them. Put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom. Alright, I'm just going to call this now. The equipment deck is going to be the deck that never gets there. There are, I believe, 5 pieces of equipment in Oath of the Gatewatch, 2 of which are rare, and there are 3 pieces of equipment from Battle for Zendikar, but none of those are playable, and I'm going to voice my honest opinion. No, Slabhammer is not a playable card in any deck, even the Landfall deck. Just my opinion. You can disagree, but this card seems terrible. Not only it's a 1 mana card, but you can't use it right away. It's not like it's tapping. You have to have another ally to use it. So you can start using it on turn 2 if you play this right away. But I mean, how many equipments are you running in your deck that you're going to be able to look at the top 4 and see an equipment? It doesn't put it on the battlefield, it puts it into your hand. So it's just so slow on you're getting equipment. It's not like you're getting creatures or cards that are going to affect the board that much. You're still going to have to cast those equipment, and you're still gonna have to pay to equip them. This just seems terrible. If it let you look at, like, if it let you search your deck for an equipment, maybe I'd be a little more excited, but even then I think it'd be a little weak. I guess it's balanced this way for the sake of constructed, but in limited, no thank you. I will pass on this card every time. But yeah, I'm calling it. The equipment deck, it's not getting there, at least not with that card. Now this, on the other hand, this is one of the most exciting non-rare cards from the set. Wall of Resurgence is a 3-mana 0/6 with Defender, so it's a 1 mana more over Fortified Rampart, which some people seem to think is a fine card. I hate it, but I guess it fits in certain decks. When this guy enters the battlefield, you can put 3/1/1 counters on target land. If you do, it becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. So, do want to point out that Awaken, unfortunately, is not back for this set, but there are plenty of cards that kind of have these Awaken abilities, kind of like Noyan Dar didn't have Awaken, but it had an Awaken type ability. This is amazing, though. Obviously, if it didn't have this effect, a 3-mana 0/6 Defender is like, no, but an 0/6 Defender that comes with a 3/3 land with haste is incredible. You're adding 3 power to the board, 9 toughness to the board, spread across 2 creatures, and you've got this huge blocker that's just going to kind of get in the way of things. Sign me up for this all day. I feel like this is first pickable if you just get shafted on the rares, but it just does so much for 3 mana, and it makes such a huge board presence. It makes me wish Assault Formation was still in this set, but it's not, unfortunately. Right, Relief Captain is 4 mana for a 3/2 when it enters battlefield, support 3. Very similar to Ampere Tactician, but more of a permanent lasting ability. The same cost, kind of the same stats. Remember that support cannot actually target Relief Captain, so if you want to get the full value out of this, you have to have 3 creatures on the battlefield when you play this. I feel like this is going to be better in Two-Headed Giant, since you can, there's much more likely chance that there are going to be 3 creatures spread out between you and your partner than there are that you went turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 creatures, and then followed up with this, put a counter on everything. My initial reaction when I saw this is that this card is not great, but if you even get 1 counter on another creature, then it's kind of like you paid 4 mana for a 4/3, which is fine. We've seen that type of card quite often. If you get 2, then you're getting a 3/2 plus 2 extra power and toughness on board, which is actually pretty great. So I think my initial reaction is just that you're not going to get the full support out of this every single time. If this said support 1 or support 2 on it, I think it'd be fine. But support 3 is actually just an upgrade to that. So I think Relief Captain is a lot better than I'm giving it credit for. This is the type of card that I really want people's opinions on. I think it's actually very good, and I actually just noticed it's an ally. I hadn't noticed that before, so it's relevant in those kinds of decks. Again, if you can get the full value out of it, it's amazing, but if you can actually just get 1 counter out of it, I think that justifies itself quite well. Immolating Glare, this is obviously a first pick material. You're not going to see him late in the pack. Destroy target attacking creature for 2 mana. It's instant, obviously. Kill Shot was a great, highly pickable card in cons, and this is just Kill Shot for 1 less mana. I was going to compare it to Celestial Flare, but obviously Celestial Flare is a little bit different. Yeah, just super efficient. Gideon's Reproach was already very good, but sometimes Gideon's Reproach couldn't hit a creature. This is going to hit whatever is attacking regardless. It's just 2 mana removal. It's way too efficient to pass up that often. A reason to actually push yourself into white if you see them coming 3rd, 4th pick, something like that. Also, I didn't put the art here, but this is the Game Day uncommon promo that you get for Attendant, which is, I think this card is going to see play in Standard. It's definitely going to see play in Standard. It's just too efficient for what it does. Alright, I believe the last uncommon here is Allied Reinforcements. This is 4 mana sorcery. You get 2 white Knight ally tokens. So 4 mana for 4 power and 4 toughness spread across 2 bodies. That's fine. I can't say too much else about this except that it does make 2 allies. So if you're playing cards with Rally, this triggers Rally twice, which is great. But just 4 mana for 4 power, 4 toughness is fine. This card is decent, even though you don't want too many of them. I would play it in any sort of ally deck, or pretty much any white deck. Alright, moving into the rares. Alright, Oath of Gideon. We have to talk about the oaths. So there are 4 oaths. We'll see the other 3 in the other colors. There isn't a black one for flavor reasons, but each oath has an Enter the Battlefield trigger, and it has a trigger or an ability that deals with planeswalkers. For the sake of limited, especially draft, mostly sealed, I'm ignoring this planeswalker ability. So if I want the card to be good, it has to be good in lieu of the first ability and in spite of the second ability. They are all rare legendary enchantments. So let's see what Oath of Gideon does. This one costs 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you put 2 1/1 core ally tokens onto the battlefield. If you have a planeswalker, it enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on it. Obviously, unless you got lucky and you drafted Gideon after drafting Oath of Gideon, that ability is not relevant in limited. Obviously, for standard reasons, this does a lot more and would be evaluated differently. But for limited, you're paying 3 mana for 2 allies. And I don't think that's that good. Again, you want the allies or you want to go wide. I would play this in most decks, but as we just saw, we have a 4 mana uncommon that gives us 2 2/2s for 1 extra mana. So Oath of Gideon is not making it in my book. This is, in my opinion, a passable rare unless you're already in the type of deck that wants it. But I would not first pick Oath of Gideon over a better uncommon. In fact, I would take something like Wall of Resurgence or Immobilize and Glare over Oath of Gideon in limited. If you're in sealed and you have Gideon in your sealed pool and Oath of Gideon, then obviously insane things happen. But I'm ignoring this ability, and even without it, even with it, if we consider it, I don't think it's worth playing. It's just 3 mana, 2 power, 2 toughness. If you want those tokens, then yeah, go for it. But me, I'm probably passing it most of the time. Same thing here, Call of the Gatewatch. This is going to be the one rare that nobody wants to open in this set. 3 mana sorcery, not instant. Search your library for a planeswalker, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So in limited, this says 3 mana, shuffle your library. If you have Gideon, sure, play this card. I don't think this is even worth splashing for if you have another planeswalker. For instance, if you pull Nissa or Chandra, I'm still not playing Call of the Gatewatch just to search out this card. The reason being is that if you've already played your planeswalker or you draw it before you draw Call of the Gatewatch, this is a completely dead card. 3 mana to shuffle your library is not an effect. It's not worth a card. But yeah, Call of the Gatewatch is my pick for worst rare in the set. Sure, and in Constructed it does different things, obviously, but how many Planeswalkers have you drafted? And don't tell me 3, because you are a liar. But yeah, pass this card every single time. Alright, and it's ironic I put these back to back. I didn't intentionally, but Eldrazi Displacer has my vote for probably my favorite card in the entire set. I absolutely love blink effects, but let's see what we got. This is a 3 mana 3/3. This is a devoid creature on a white card. It is the only white Eldrazi that I believe exists at all, and it's definitely the only one in this block, the only white card that has devoid. So remember, sometimes you play like red, white, and Battle for Zendikar, and you ended up with a bunch of red cards like Nettle Drone and the Sentinel that cared about colorless cards, and then you had white, which had no colorless cards. This is rare, so it doesn't really change that, but it is interesting to see it. Anyway, the effect, 2 mana and a colorless, exile another target creature, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. This does so much. First off, the stats are great. 3 mana 3/3s are great and limited, but this can do so many things. Blink effects are super powerful. It lets you reuse Enter the Battlefield triggers, which there are a ton of in this set. Tons of ETB effects that give you scions when they enter the battlefield, which, by the way, you can use those scions to trigger this again. Tons of other ETB effects. This can kill a token on the opponent's side of the field. The creature enters the battlefield tapped, so this can get rid of a blocker for the turn, or it can get rid of an attacker since you can do it at instant speed. Removes blockers, attackers, kills tokens. If your opponent's playing auras, this resets it. If your opponent's going all in on support and they've got a creature with tons of 1/1 counters, Eldrazi Displacer resets that creature. It just does so much as long as you can use that colorless. But as we saw in the last set, if you looked at the colorless and artifact creatures, that's not that hard to pull off. You can make colorless mana quite easily. So yes, Eldrazi Displacer is getting drafted every single time. I love this sort of effect, and it's not something we get in Limited very often. Alright, here we have an Equipment Matters card that's actually pretty decent. Maybe I have to remand my statement about the Equip deck not getting there, because this guy is super efficient. Stonehaven Outfitter is a 2-mana 2/2, as for some reason equipment cards seem to be bearers for some reason, but equipped creatures you control get +1/+1. Anything that has an equipment on it is boosted +1/+1. And then whenever an equipped creature you control dies, you draw a card. Alright, Bonesaw anyone? We talked about this last time. Is Stonehaven Outfitter a reason to draft all of the Bonesaws in your deck? Notice having multiple equipment on creatures doesn't increase these effects, but I do want to point out there is a similarity to Relic Seeker, and the reason I say that is because in Origins, Relic Seeker had an effect that if it dealt damage to your opponent and Renowned, you could search your deck for an equipment. So what people would do is, if they had Relic Seeker in the deck, they would automatically play Veteran Sidearm just because Relic Seeker could find it if it dealt damage. The thing is, Veteran Sidearm is not a good card. Sure, it was fine, but it was not very good. There was no reason just to jam bad equipment in your deck because you could get some sort of ability off of it. The reason I'm saying that is because there's no reason to play bad equipment in your deck just because you have Stonehaven Outfitter. Do not play Pathway Arrows or Slab Hammer in your deck, or God forbid, Hedron Blade, whatever the card is called. Do not play bad equipment just because you have this card. It will make your deck worse, and the abilities you're getting out of it is not worth justifying a terrible card. Of course, Bonesaw is still up in the air. I have to play with Bonesaw before I have a strong opinion about it. But my opinion is Stonehaven Outfitter is actually great if you have decent equipment to go with it, and at the very least, it's a 2-mana 2/2, which we cannot complain that much about. Alright, the final rare here is Munda's Vanguard, a Cohort effect that I think is actually decent. Well, first off, before we even look at Cohort, this is 5-mana 3/3, so it's not very good on that spectrum, so it's going to have to justify itself with its ability. If you tap it for Cohort along with another ally, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Now that seems good. A nice mix of aggression and defense. It lets you kind of build up blockers if that's what you're doing, although you do have to tap 2 things down. But if you're really aggressive and you have a wide board presence, you can use kind of this and another ally you're not really using to pump the rest of your team. And they are 1/1 counters, so they'll stay. Your creatures are just going to get bigger and bigger. This reminds me kind of Outlast. You're tapping your creatures down and they're getting bigger, but it does leave you kind of open in the long run, since you have to put your defense down. Munda's Vanguard is probably the only Cohort card I've seen so far that I've talked about that I would be even interested in picking at all. Again, I don't think this is busted. I think it's balanced on this ability because you are tapping 2 things down to use it. And it's only really relevant if you have a wide board presence. But I think this card's fine, and I would actually first pick this over most cards. But I wouldn't be very happy about being in an ally deck that has more Cohort than it does aggressive attackers. Alright, and finally we get 2 white mythics. The first one is General Tazri. This is a 5-mana 3/4, and I feel like it was designed just to appease people who wanted to play allies in Commander and didn't have a good ally commander, because this is a 5-color general due to its color identity. But is it good in Limited? That's the question. So 5-mana 3/4 is playable, but not quite what you want. The first effect is really what we're looking at. When she enters, when she enters the battlefield, search your library for an ally, reveal it, put it into your hand. So you get an immediate value. This draws you a card, basically, and a relevant card. If you're playing a lot of rally cards, this is great. It triggers rally, and then you know that you're going to have it again, kind of like Munda from Battle for Zendikar, even though I think this is a little bit better than Munda. The second ability is not irrelevant. There is a lot of mana fix, and so this is something we're happy to see on this type of card, as opposed to, do I dare say it, Prism Array, which is, in my opinion, not even a card. Something that a kid developed and accidentally found its way into Battle for Zendikar packs. But For one of each color, ally creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of colors among those creatures. So worst case scenario, you're getting +1/+1 because Tazri is going to have it. Also, I'm assuming you're fetching an ally that is perhaps red or another color, so you're probably getting +2/+2 off this if you're triggering it at all. You might just have Tazri as a value card that's not really ever using the ability, and that's fine because it gets you a card that's it justifies its own place when you play it. If you can activate this ability for at least 3, that's quite good. It's actually very good. If you have 3 different colors among the allies you control, then you're getting +3/+3 on all of your creatures. Not all of your creatures, your ally creatures, but that's very strong. So unfortunately, this is a mythic. I'm not going to be able to play with it a lot, but if I open this in my first pack, it is a very intriguing card, one that I'll pick up a lot of mana fixing for, and one that I'm actually quite excited to go into an ally deck for. I'm looking very forward to pulling this card, and I hope I do quite often. Alright, Linvala the Preserver. So we have another Linvala. This is a 6-mana 5/5 flyer, and before you start whining about the abilities and the below average stats, we already had Angel of Renewal in the last set, which was a 6-mana 4/4 flyer with upside. So obviously Linvala is playable in Limited. I'll let you speculate on Constructed all you want, but when she enters the battlefield, if an opponent has more life than you, you gain 5 life. When she enters the battlefield and an opponent has more creatures than you, you get a 3/3 white angel token with flying. So the 5 life is nice, but we really, really want to trigger that second ability, which means when you play her, your opponent has to have at least 2 creatures to your 1, because Linvala will count herself. So if your opponent has 1 creature and you don't have any, and you play Linvala, the second ability will not trigger because you will both have 1 creature. It's not greater than or equal to, it has to be more creatures than you. Again, consideration for Two-Headed Giant, you get to choose the opponent. Well, you don't choose anything, but we check to see if either of the opponents has more creatures than you, and you get a 3/3 if that's true for either opponent. That doesn't matter so much with the life game, because you are going to your opponent's going to share the same life total. But yeah, this card is just amazing. Absolute first snap pick. I really want a foil of this. It looks amazing. The effect is great. Sure, we can compare it to Thragtusk, but you know, I never got to play with Thragtusk in Limited, and this is more of a conditional Thragtusk, but even better since the angel has flying. But yeah, it's even if you don't get the abilities, it's playable. Unexcited at that point, but you can set this up quite easily. Let your opponent get 1 more creature than you, or 2 more creatures than you, play it, gain your life back, and get a 3/3. You added 8 power to the board for 6 mana, and that is all flying. Absolute snap first pick every single time. I really hope I pull this card at least once, just to have one for my collection, but this is great. I think it's hard to argue that this card is great and Limited. Definitely better than Tazri as a white mythic, but yeah, I'm taking it, and that's all I'm going to say about it. What do you think of Linvala? Is it a first snap pickable card for you? To me, it just screams Limited bomb, and I mean like the bombiest of the bombs. But yeah, there are all the white cards. So we saw support, cohort. We saw lots of allies, and yeah, some abilities I'm not very excited about. I'm not excited about cohort, and I'm not excited about support outside of the Two-Headed Giant format, but still a nice mix of playable cards in addition to the cards that I'm not very excited about. So white seems like it's got a lot of different things going on, which is great for Limited. It leads to unique deck choices, and I'm really looking forward to drafting it, even if there's a nice slew of cards that I don't think are going to be that good. But let me know in the comments what you think of these cards, and as always, like, subscribe, comment, and look out for the rest of my review on Oath of the Gatewatch. I will probably do red next, but we'll see. Depends on